When these guys are telling you to use a two-part paint, I just don't think they're being honest with you. Hi, I'm Joe, and welcome to Motor City Boat Werks. Let's get to work.
If you're new to the channel, I want to welcome you. And if you're one of our returning subscribers, well, we're not in the boat works. We're in a place called Ep89 on the Peloponnesian Peninsula in Greece, about 2 hours from Athens.
If you've been watching my channel, you know that I sometimes take trips away from the boat works. I travel with my wife all over the world. It's something we've committed to since I've recently retired. I'm always looking for interesting boat stories, interesting boats. I like to bring you along on my trips. It's a lot less boring than the boat works, and I find it always recharges my motivation. This trip, we've traveled more than 5,000 miles to Athens, Greece. You might be asking yourself, what does Greece have to do with boat paint? They say logic was born of ancient Greece, and from logic we can know the truth. This episode is about finishing out your boat and trying to decide, well, what kind of paint do you put on your boat restoration? Greece is an amazing country with tremendous history, amazing food, ancient ruins, and it doesn't hurt that it's one of the best sailing capitals in all of Europe. It's almost the end of winter, so the boating season hasn't quite begun. The only boats you see along the coastline are work boats, fishing boats. Everything is very utilitarian. This got me thinking about the upcoming restoration of my Skipper 20 sailboat. How was I going to finish out the boat? How was I going to paint it? What paint was I going to even use? You see it all the time online in the boat building forums and in the Facebook boat building groups. Folks are asking what kind of paint should they use on their boat restoration project. I'm going to try and make the logical argument that there's really only one choice for the amateur boat restorer. My opinion may not be a popular one, but it's based on more than 30 years experience restoring old boats on a DIY budget. This trip we focused on the mainland of Greece, primarily the area around Athens, that's Attica, the Peloponnesian Peninsula, and also central Greece. No matter where you go, you're pretty much tripping over ancient history. I won't bore you with all the details, but there were a couple highlights. Today we've taken a day trip to the Temple of Poseidon. This is the spot. We're on a high hill here. The temple's behind me. This is the spot where King Aegean jumped off the cliff into the sea. That's why it's called the Aegean Sea. Right here. Right down there. We're driving along and all of a sudden we come upon this boatyard. It's called Saronic Boats. Saronic Boats are very well known. It's a Greek boat building firm. It's named after the Saronic Gulf. That's the body of water between the peninsulas of Atticus and Argolis in the Aegean Sea. Oh, it's so good. They make boats for the tourism industry, but also specialty fishing boats. To a guy like me, this hull looks very similar. So I got out and started looking around, and I ended up making contact with the guys working inside. They took me inside, and they gave me a quick tour. They let me see how things are done inside a real boat works. Being inside their boat works reminds me the difference in professional quality work versus what an amateur can actually do. And that's really the reason I wanted to take a moment to talk about your paint options when you're restoring your boat. Now, I don't have anything against two-part paints or anybody who sells two-part paints. I don't have any sponsors in the boat works. But this is a common question. All the salty dogs and most of the YouTube community will tell you that you should be using a two-part paint. Brands like Awlgrip and Alexseal seem to be the popular paints of the moment. But I want to take a step back and ask you to think about a couple things when you're choosing to paint for your boat restoration project. A one-part paint is a paint that comes right out of the can and you can put it straight onto your boat. A two-part paint comes in two components, a part A and a part B. You mix them together and then you take that paint and you can put it on your boat. The idea behind a two-part paint is that when they cure, they're considerably harder than a one-part paint. One of the components is an actual hardener. Two-part paints are what professionals use in the marine industry. Often these two-part paints are sprayed. That's what gives the really glossy, mirror-like finish. Certain YouTube channels and all the salty dogs on the internet forums will tell you this is the paint that an amateur should be using. When these guys are telling you to use a two-part paint, I just don't think they're being honest with you. It's been an exciting couple of days. Every day we venture out further and further from Athens. There's just so many things to see. We're at a place called Acrocorinthus. We're outside Athens. We're going to be going up to the top, up there. It's a fortress on top of a mountain overlooking the Corinthian Canal. The Corinth Canal is a man-made canal that connects the Ionian Sea to the Aegean Sea. As early as the 7th century BC, there was an attempt to connect these two bodies of water, but today's canal wasn't completed until the beginning of the 20th century. I'm going to tell you, this is about a 15-20 degree incline. You probably can't tell. And it's all rough kind of cobblestone rocks. And my calves are burning as we make our way up here, but the scenery is pretty amazing. This is very cool. This fortress is in near the town called Corinthos, and it's about an hour outside of Athens. So it's really kind of awesome to have the place to yourself and be moving around. You can't ask for anything better than this. Look at this. It's very cool. This is really amazing, and there's virtually no one here. Driving my wife crazy. I keep stopping the car and getting out to look at all the fishing boats. I just like their practicality. No one is worried about a shiny finish. It's all about the work. You don't see any Greek fishermen using a two-part paint. The fact of the matter is when you get right down to it and compare a one-part to a two-part paint, they each have their pros and cons. They can be durable and hard-wearing. You can get an amazing shiny finish. Of course, the paint job can be done by the do-it-yourselfer. But if we're honest, two-part paints have a couple of significant disadvantages. The first one is the cost. It's a fact. Two-part paints can cost 3 or 4 times more. On even the simplest boat restoration, this can throw your budget completely out the window. And then there's the shelf life. One of the biggest disadvantages of a two-part paint is that once you mix the components together, well, you have a very finite shelf life. You can't just put it away and expect to open it up and use it a week later. Whatever two-part paint you use that day, well, you're pretty much stuck using all of it or throwing the rest away. Any way you look at it, two-part paints are more complicated. You have to mix two things together. It's got 2 parts to go wrong, not one. And that brings me to preparation. No matter what paint you use, of course you have to prepare your hull and deck. And let's be honest, that's most of the work. But two-part paints can be particularly finicky when the surface has to be prepared with a particular product that matches the two-part paint system. And let me remind you, no matter what they tell you, two-part paints require an extra level of safety, especially if you're spraying. All this adds extra cost to your bottom line. It's just not accurate to say that a two-part paint takes the same amount of effort, the same amount of skill, or even the same amount of money. You're still not convinced? Well, let me offer 2 more logical arguments based on my experience. Follow my logic. The reality is after you spend all that time preparing and painting your boat with an expensive two-part paint that is finicky, and you gotta have some technical knowledge, by the time you're done with all of that and you take your brand new fancy restored boat out, well, you're gonna crash into something, or somebody's gonna crash into you, or some debris are gonna hit you while you're on the water, or something's gonna happen while it's parked in your yard. And then you're going to have to repair your very expensive two-part paint job with more expensive two-part paint. Ask me how I know. One of the primary arguments in favor of a two-part paint is that two-part paint is incredibly durable. It'll last 10, 20, 30 years or more. It'll last the lifetime of the boat. You'll never have to worry about it again. But the reality is that most boat owners, they won't own their boat for their lifetime. They'll own it for a relatively short period of time, maybe just a few years, and then they'll sell the boat, get a different one, or go on and do something else. And guess who benefited from the very expensive two-part paint that you spent all your time working on to put on your boat? That's right, the next owner, and they are loving it. And no one's paying extra just because you used a two-part paint. All I can say is this trip to Greece has been one of the best so far. The culture, the extraordinary sights, don't even get me started on the delicious food. I'm definitely coming back. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a comment below. You can send me an email through the Motor City Boat Werks website or on the homepage of my YouTube channel. I want to thank you for stopping by. We'll see you next time. Stay motivated. If you like these videos, please hit the subscribe button. These videos would not be possible without your support.